All right. Well, welcome everyone to the NOFA Interstate Council Policy Meeting. Our host is Steve Gilman, and he's going to coordinate presentations from people from, I guess, all or most of the NOFA chapters. And I just want to thank our sponsors. These are folks that have put up some money for making this conference affordable. And so please, if you can give them some business, I appreciate it. I guess we'd all appreciate it. There are sponsors of different categories, I guess. And we want to take a moment to look at our Native American map of this area. I'm broadcasting from New Jersey, which is the Lenape Nation, I think you call it.
Thank you, Al. Liz, first slide, please. Okay, this is our annual policy workshop. It is virtual, as you can see this year. We're very much used to being at the summer conference with everybody around and face-to-face and person-to-person. My name is Steve Gilman. I'm the NOFA Policy Coordinator. Elizabeth Henderson and Maddie Kempner are the Policy Committee co-chairs. And today we have members of the NOFA Interstate Council Policy Committee with us. So just to give a broad outline of what's going to happen this evening, I'm going to give kind of a brief overview of our NOFA policy initiatives. That should take about 10 minutes. Then there's going to be presentations by the NOFA chapters at 5 minutes each. We have 6 of the 7 chapters with us this evening. NOFA Rhode Island has a death in the family, so they won't be joining us. After the chapter presentations, there's going to be questions for the chapter reps from you folks joining in. We'll have about 10 minutes to specifically address anything that was brought up. And then for the remaining 30 minutes, we're going to just open this up for a group discussion for your input on where our policy program should be headed. So that's kind of an overview of where we're going. Next slide, please. Here's a slide of an actual face-to-face meeting at the 2018 policy retreat. We've been meeting in Woolman Hill, Deerfield, Mass. This is kind of a picture of an action pic. Maddie is presenting, and a number of people are spread around the room taking notes and participating. So the Policy Committee is a project of the NOFA Interstate Council with representatives from the 7 NOFA chapters. We meet monthly and usually with face-to-face meetings at the Spring Policy Retreat and the Summer Conference, and of course all that's virtual here in 2020. We also work with National Organic and Sustainable Agricultural Alliances. Next slide, please. This slide is of Leah, Liana, and Liz of the NOFA New York delegation for the NOC fly-in back in 2017. This year, in the spring, we had a virtual fly-in for NOC via Zoom, which actually worked out very well because we could get presentations right to staff, and we had a few members also that participated with us. It was face-to-face that way, and we could also broaden because we could invite other NOFA members to actually be part of the fly-in, which would be prohibitive in terms of flight costs and hotel rooms and all the other things we have to do to put together a regular fly-in. We're a member of the Organic Farmers Association. Maddie Kempner is our lead on that. We're a a founding member of the Agricultural Justice Project. Elizabeth Henderson and Callie Alexander run that. We're a member of the National Family Farm Coalition. Grace Odell and Sarah Lang Gilliatt are our primary members, representatives. We're a forming member of the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition. There we have a number of participants, myself, Elizabeth, Liana Hoods, Marty Dagoberto, and Steve Kellety. And then we have the National Organic Coalition, which is in the picture, Elizabeth, Maddie, myself, Grace, and Marty. We're also international, members of the International Federation of Agricultural Movements, which is IFOAM, and also IFOAM North America, which Elizabeth's heading up, and she's looking for an alternate to join her with that. And all these alliances include monthly calls, annual meetings, and fly-ins, virtual or otherwise. Next photo, please. Here's a picture of Willie Nelson signing checks. And we've been blessed now for 2 years in a row as recipients of Farm Aid Project for Soil Health. Excuse me. And so this year in 2020, we combined funding from Farm Aid with a grant from Cliff Bar for this year's project. This year we're virtual again, and it's taken quite a bit of work to switch this over from the farm tours to virtual farm tours. And in the past we had farmer roundtables. This year it's being done through Zoom. And we also have continuing legislative initiatives in the 7 NOFA states, although the legislative schedules have definitely changed this year because of the pandemic. Carol Roselle is our Education and Practices support person, and Stephen Kellety is our policy support person. Next slide, please. So we have a pretty large ongoing policy agenda. This slide, again, is a NOC picture. It's on Capitol Hill visit with Senator Leahy. And again, these are NOC folks. I'd say primarily on our list this year for the chapters is COVID farmer support. And just trying to keep track of all the support programs going on, getting them to our farmers, trying to keep everything lined up, and trying to keep the Trump administration honest in the process has been another whole full-time job on top of our regular full-time job. We also have an ongoing agenda item entitled Climate Change, and here we've been a real formative force through our alliances in the Agricultural Resiliency Act, which is formed by a bill by Shelley Pingree, who's a representative from Maine. And it's a bill that will help farmers build healthier soils, reduce carbon pollution, and harness the power of agriculture to remove carbon from the atmosphere and sequester it in the soil. We're also supporting Senator Booker of New Jersey, the Farm System Reform Act, to help us phase out of CAFO family farming by 2040. And these are both marker bills, which means they're formulated and can be picked up in one way or another with various sign-ons. We also work on food safety regulations and enforcement, racial and farm worker justice. We're supporting multiple lawsuits against USDA including the withdrawal of the Organic Livestock and Poultry Practices Rule. And we are also active with GMOs, which again have been usurped by the present administration. So that's just a brief glimpse. We also, next slide please, have a really ongoing agenda item called Organic Integrity. The picture is of the T-shirt for Keep the Soil Organic. That group is now morphed into the Real Organic Project. And we're, with the National Organic Coalition especially, we monitor the National Organic Program, the NOP, within the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And we're supporting lawsuits challenging the certification of hydroponic operations under USDA Organic Seal. We also provide input to the National Organic Standards Board. Next slide, please. This is just a thank you for all the donations that come our way. Policy is notoriously hard to fund. Anybody interested can always go to the NOFA.org site. Here's a screenshot where you can go to the policy pages to the donate button. And last slide here is the preparations for our NOFA 50th anniversary. This is a big deal. And I'm going to turn this over to Elizabeth to give us kind of a glimpse at what will be coming up during the next year in terms of preparing for this with input from all NOFA members. So thank you. Liz?
Thanks, Steve. Well, next year, amazingly, will be NOFA's 50th anniversary. And it's exciting to think about it, both as a celebration of our resilience and our persistence, and also as a beginning for the next 50 years. So New York, first with NOP, we put together a national organic action plan. And then in New York, we did a New York organic action plan. And I think we might take this as kind of a model of what we could do. We had a series of meetings around the country for the national one and around New York State, where we invited people to think about 4 questions. What's working for organic? What's not working? Where do we want to go from here? And what is NOFA's role? And we collected all of the brainstorming and then were able to put that all together into an action plan. And it was a really good process that got a lot of member involvement, a lot of great ideas. We were able to hear from a lot of people. And in Vermont, NOFA Vermont has already been working on a stimulus plan for an agriculturally resilient, emergency-ready Vermont. Well, I suggest we take that as kind of our basic document for a resilient and emergency-ready Northeast, and have worked this text up so that we can use it as the basic text that we'll share with everybody in thinking about how to put together our Northeast Organic Action Plan. So that's just a suggestion for people, but I wanted to throw it out there because I think it's something that we could do and that would result in really solid thinking that will set us on a good track, short-term, mid-term, and long-term for the next 50 years. So now we're going to hear chapter presentations. First, we'll have Liana talking about NOFA New York. Al, can you unmute Liana?
I got it.
Okay, but I need to make you a host. You have some slides, Liana?
Liz has those slides.
Okay. Right, so
yeah. So Hi all, I'm Liana Hoods. I'm the policy advisor for NOFA New York, and been doing this for a long time with Liz and Steve for NOFA New York and for the National Organic Coalition. Like many NOFAs and farm groups around the countries, we've spent the last chunk of months, 5 going on 6 months, focused on what we need during COVID, especially from the federal government. And I'll get to that at the end if there's a little time, but I wanted to focus on some strategies at the state level that we've been working on. Because about 2 years ago, the New York State Legislature became Democrat-led, and we have a Democratic governor, and there was obvious opportunities there to move some progressive legislation around the environment, agriculture, social justice, et cetera. So we have seen some movement, and we had great hopes at the start of the 2020 session. Looked like a coalition of New York organizations was going to be able to help pass a soil health bill, but COVID got in the way and pushed it to next year. We did have a hearing that 3 long-standing NOFA farmers, including Liz Henderson, were the feature of, and the cooperative extension even said the data on soil health would not be possible without that 30 years of work by NOFA farmers. In 2019, the state passed a Climate Leadership Community Protection Act, which created a process to get New York State carbon neutral by 2040. We're working on the implementation of that, including that we want to see, we have advocated for an organic farmer from NOFA New York to be on the Agriculture and Forestry Committee, and also that when they're looking, the entire piece is looking at incentives. They look to diverse farming systems. Another bill passed in 2019 that's being implemented now is the Farm Worker Fair Labor Practices Act, which we generally supported most of the items, but there was a very fast movement to overtime for farm workers at 60 hours, and that started January 1st of 2020. It's been a hard slog for our farmers, so we've been working with coalitions to create some proposals to provide incentives and compensating measures to help our farmers adapt to increasing labor costs. There's been, for several years, a apiary bill, a New York apiary bill that's has not passed because it has required mandatory registration of all hives, and we got involved because the commissioner asked us why we had that position of opposing mandatory registration. We haven't worked a whole lot on that, but we did manage to get an organic producer named to the Apiary Advisory Board, and that set us off on looking at what other advisory boards or commissions in agriculture in New York State existed. And we have a mini campaign in NOFA New York now to get an organic farmer on any agricultural committee advisory board in New York State. We've succeeded in the Dairy Promotion Board as well, but it's up to us to figure out where those boards are. And we are still pushing our state to help advance organic. While we're 3rd and 4th in organic acres and number of farms in the country, our commissioner does not report out any organic facts in his budgetary reports each year. So it's a big push for us to ask the commissioner time and again to consider organic and everything that they do. As Steve noted, our work on national legislation has been as part of members of all these coalitions that he named. And I just want to reiterate for a minute that this, during COVID, doing our fly-in to DC virtually was a real opportunity for NOFA. We brought in several of our members and trained them how to do visits, and they got to speak on their own behalf to our legislators, and it was very effective in that. And we are looking at doing virtual lobbying much more. because it does allow everyone to participate. Other pieces are organic dairy, which we push. The two pieces have really affected our organic dairy farmers negatively, and that is the slowing of the moving to final regulation on the origin of livestock and the fair implementation of the pasture rule. We've worked on the state level to get our commissioner interested enough to participate at the state departments of agriculture meetings on behalf of our organic dairy farmers. And we've worked somewhat with the Northeast Association of State Departments of Agriculture on this as well. These coalitions have really helped build bigger federal issues throughout the region and in our states, and getting them to participate as well as us. We did have some COVID response pieces that we started in February 2020 and are constantly revising pieces that we're asking our state to work on, and of course in the federal responses in each of the economic stimulus programs. I'm going to end there and take your questions later. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Leanna. Let's move to New Jersey. Kelly?
Kelly, can you
Thanks. Hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Hello.
Hi there.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone, for everyone joining us. And I really appreciate it whenever we all get together, as well as the participants today. It's really nice to speak to everyone. I'm actually
You've got
really here to
in your voice. Can you adjust your sound a little bit?
lower, you think?
No, it's
It's
loud.
better.
It's intermittent somehow.
Is that better?
Yes.
Yes.
So far. Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry for any disturbance. But I'm really holding up quite an achievement here for New Jersey agriculture. I believe, Liz, you have my first slide up, which actually shows that recently the American Farmland Trust has just issued its multi-year study on farm loss across the nation. And of course, it's the title Farm Under Threat, the State of States. And it concludes that, believe it or not, and this is really quite an achievement, that New Jersey ranks first in the nation for implementing policies and programs to stem the loss of farmland. I'm very proud of this fact, and we really, really are very strong, and our constituents, as well as our public, always vote environmentally here. Our farmers are really, really proactive, and I'm very, very proud of this achievement. As a small and as mighty a state we are. It is noted, though, American Farmland Trust is the only nationwide nonprofit who focuses exclusively on the preservation and protection of Americans' farmland's resources.
Kelly,
It is noted that
Kelly, can I interrupt you? You're still coming a little bit hard to hear for some people. And Marty suggests you turn off your video. Might make it a little better.
Is that better?
So far.
I just took off speaker.
Yeah, so far. Yep.
Okay, I'm so sorry again. But the Zoom is, when I went on to the Zoom, it did not give me my cursor to unmute, and so please excuse me again. But it is noted that nationwide, that almost 2,000 acres a day are paved over, built up, or converted to uses that threaten the future of farmland. So obviously this report about preservation and preservation efforts. This agricultural scorecard actually is, of course, the first ever state-by-state analysis of policies that respond to the development threats to farmland and rangeland. The Agricultural Protection Scorecard analyzes 6 programs, which actually are highlighted in the slide to your left, as you see them, and policies that are key to securing sufficient and suitable base of agricultural land. The state, New Jersey's State Farm Preservation Program is administered by the SADC, known as the State Agricultural Development Committee, which is an 11-member board comprised of farmers, public members, state agencies, and of course, our Commissioner, Secretary of Agriculture. To date, the Farmland Preservation Program here in New Jersey has resulted in permanent protection over 2,600 farms, accounting for more than 230,000 acres. 1/3 of all the farmland in our state has been preserved, and they're making even bigger fixes for farmland protection. Pride to show this to this. And while New Jersey ranks and earns the top rank for protecting farmland, as you see to the right, it also ranks third among the states with the most threatened agricultural land, with Texas being #1 and North Carolina being #2. I'd like to go to the next slide, please, because the job is not done. New Jersey has the most expensive farm, making it difficult for a new generation of farmers to find land, while more needs to be done for farmers using practices on this resilient to climate change. So what is being done? And what more can New Jersey do? Yeah, as you can see, I'm going to highlight actually on number 3, supporting farm viability and access to land. Previously, through the State Agricultural Development Committee and the Department of Agriculture and NOFA New Jersey, through a grant, we established the Land Link site. And again, I present this to this webinar, and in fact, we do now have a very robust study of farmland. Land that is being sold, as well as farmers leasing land according to soil characteristics and production goals. It creates a more robust follow-up. Really something that is digging in with SADC and the Department of Agriculture to follow up with those inquiries, distributing more resource information. Leasing in New Jersey still is very, of course, run doing small farm green, and coming up in November, Allison, with our leader today, will be running, of course, a secondary course called the Road to Certification. NOFA New Jersey's programs foster and, of course, encourage more mentorship and creating more access to land for beginning farmers, for continuation of non-generational as well as generational farms, as well as, of course, establishment and so that they succeed. My last slide, please.
Here you go.
Okay, thank you so much. Again, NOFA states core group, and we say, of course, our core mission statements on building an organic food system, as you can see, by nurturing and being inclusive of all organic growers. Okay, so that we can, in fact, grow a more resilient food system, especially now with COVID. We've tried to, of course, exactly how nimble some of our farmers are with local.
Can't hear you, Kelly, anymore. Kelly, maybe we can come back to you. Somehow you have disappeared. So let's go on to Vermont, and I'm going to stop the screen share. And sorry, Kelly, I'm going to pass the agenda.
Hello?
Yeah, we can't hear you. To Maddie Kempner of NOFA Vermont.
Hi, everybody. I am going to, oh, sorry, Callie, we lost you. Hopefully you can come back on later. I'm going to at least start off with video on, but I am likely also going to have to cut it, unfortunately, because my rural internet doesn't always allow for that, for those two things to happen at once. But it's great to be here with everybody, and it's really exciting to hear about all the great work that other chapters have been doing. I wanted to share from Vermont a few things, a little bit about sort of our policy priorities before the time of COVID, which, as I'm sure for many of you, and as we heard a little bit from Liana especially, have had to shift in this immediate pandemic environment. And then I would like to share a little bit about the work that we've been doing in response to COVID to ensure equitable relief and support for Vermont organic farmers and also folks facing increasing food insecurity, as well as our farm workers here in Vermont. And then I'll share a little bit about the vision and plan for the future of Vermont agriculture that Liz mentioned earlier. In terms of our policy priorities prior to COVID, which are very much still undergirding our work and will continue going forward, we have been focusing a lot within the past year or so on organic agriculture as a climate solution. And there have been, it's really telling because there have been 2 bills introduced in Vermont during the last legislative session that focused on climate solutions, neither of which really meaningfully included agriculture, which was very telling for us as an agricultural state that prides ourselves on our, immense working landscape and on supporting our farmers, that the folks working on climate solutions were not really considering agriculture as a part of that. So that was really an eye-opening moment, I think, for us. And so we've started doing a lot of work on the ground, building coalition with folks in the environmental community and with farmers to try to raise the profile of agriculture as a climate solution that I think we all probably on this call understand that it can be. And so that's been, those conversations and that coalition building has been really great. And I will say so far that the environmental community and legislative leaders that we've been working with have really welcomed that conversation. And I think, because we are so positioned at that intersection of agriculture and the environment, that we're really well positioned to take the lead, I think, in showing how ag can be a climate solution in a way that maybe other agriculture groups in the state aren't necessarily. But I think there's a huge opportunity to build coalition there. So I'm excited about it. And we also, as Steve mentioned, participate regularly with the National Organic Coalition at the federal level, and they really have been taking the lead there nationally on how agriculture can be included in climate solutions. Another policy priority of ours that we've been working on for several years now, and then to some degree since our chapter started, is pollinator protection and pesticides. And in the last couple of years, we have formed a coalition with some other agriculture and environmental organizations, both in the state and across the region, to do some work around updating Vermont's pesticide regulations, which are extremely outdated and have not been updated since 1991. We had a bill moving through the legislature this year, which unfortunately had to take a backseat to COVID-related efforts, but that bill would have revised and updated the mandate of the Vermont Pesticide Advisory Council, which is a group that's tasked with advising the Agency of Agriculture on the use of pesticides, and specifically has a mandate to find ways to reduce the use of pesticides, both in agriculture and on public lands and other land use types like golf courses and things like that, who really have not been fulfilling their mandate. So we have a lot of work cut out for us there. And then lastly, soil health, as I know it is for the other chapters as well, has been a policy priority of ours. And that's been really interesting because I feel like with that in particular, there is a lot of opportunity to really dovetail on the ground learning opportunities that bring farmers together who are, leading the way on soil health and also who have a lot to learn, dovetailing those educational on the ground efforts with advocacy in the State House. So we've been doing a lot of, as the other chapters have, soil health workshops in the last few years, which we've incorporated conversations about what the best policies can be to improve soil health with those educational efforts. And then we also, Vermont in 2019 created a payment for ecosystem services working group to study the idea of paying farmers, compensating farmers for the ecosystem services that they provide beyond just food and fiber for those services. And NOFA was able to have a seat on that working group representing the interests of small scale diversified farmers. So that effort culminated in January with a report to our legislature on progress, but that really we had 5 months as a group to come up with a proposal for a payment for ecosystem services program, which is incredibly complex. If you've ever looked into that topic, it's definitely needs more than 5 months of effort. So we ended up going back to the legislature and requesting essentially another 2 years to come up with a robust program that we could really get behind. And so our work will continue. We have not so far received funding to continue the work. So I think that part is a little bit TBD, but I think there are some interests that like the Nature Conservancy, for example, is really involved in payment for ecosystem services at the national level and have said they might be able to help us come up with funding to continue. So stay tuned for more on that. In terms of specific response to the pandemic at the state level, that has been a really interesting experience in the last several months also. We have had to do a lot of work to try to ensure equitable relief to all farms across the state, including our small and mid-sized organic producers who are really having to do a lot of, I don't know if y'all are sick of this word yet, but pivoting to find different markets and different crops to feed their communities during this time. I think there's been a lot of focus, and in some ways appropriately so, on the impacts to dairy agriculture, because dairy was really quickly hit with substantial price losses, starting with at the beginning of the pandemic due to decreased demand. And it's been challenging because the story of our local, more diversified farms is much more nuanced. And while I think a lot of them are doing really well and seeing a lot of increased interest in CSA signups, and a lot of local livestock producers are selling out of meat earlier than ever, which is excellent. But I think that there's also a substantial toll on those producers that is being seen, just with all of the effort and energy they're having to put into meeting these demands. So we've had to do a lot of work to make sure that those concerns and the needs of those producers are being heard as much as the concerns of dairy producers. So that's been really interesting. The other thing that has been really central to us in our COVID-19 response is making sure that we're addressing the needs of food insecure Vermonters. I think that statistics have shown a 46% increase in food insecurity just here in Vermont as a result of the pandemic, which is hugely concerning to us. And we do a lot of work at NOFA supporting, local food access through farmers markets and CSAs and through farm to school. And so we've been doing a lot of work with an amazing coalition of partners like Hunger Free Vermont and the Vermont Food Bank and Shelburne Farms, who we partner with a lot on farm to school efforts to make sure that those food security needs are being met, and also that those food security needs are being combined as much as possible with the need to support our local farmers. So we're seeing just a real opportunity, I think, in that way to start to build the groundwork for systems that can both make sure that Vermonters are fed and also make sure that we're supporting our local farms through state-funded institutions. So that's been really exciting work. And then lastly, in terms of COVID response, we've been working again with a coalition of partners like Migrant Justice and the Human Rights Coalition to make sure that farm workers, who really undergird especially our state's dairy industry, but also a lot of, H2A workers come up and work on our vegetable farms and then our orchards later in the season, to make sure that those folks are being supported during this time with the needs that they have to stay healthy. And also we've been advocating to try to get a relief fund set up that would provide them with some form of a stimulus payment that so many Americans receive, but that a lot of these folks were left out of due to their citizenship status. We have not been successful so far in raising those funds, but there are efforts to do that privately through, public and private partnerships. So we're continuing that work as well. And then lastly, I don't know how much time I have left, but I just wanted to share a little bit more about the vision and the plan that Liz mentioned. I think as a result of the pandemic, in part, we were really seeing a need here in Vermont, although we have such an amazing network of food system advocates and farmers and food service organizations here in the state that are working for a better food system. There is a lack of a really bold vision for what we want our future food system to look like. And so I think we really saw a need, especially during the time of the pandemic, when some of the faults in our food system became so clear, to really articulate that vision and set out some clear action steps for how to achieve it. So we're really excited. We have this future of farming plan on our website, which I am gonna just link in the chat, and I'm hoping everyone can see this. And it really lays out sort of the issue in terms of where we are now and what is lacking with our current food system, both nationally and here in Vermont, where we can go, and what it looks like when we get there, what, you know, really the indicators of success will be. And then we've laid out some specific action steps for, you know, this year, the next 5 years, and then beyond that, that we really are excited to build some coalition and partner with a lot of different folks within the state and hopefully in the region to achieve. I think one thing too that I'm seeing this as is an opportunity to sort of, you know, put out a clear vision and a plan for agriculture that can then be combined with similar visions and plans for things like climate change as a whole, or solutions for housing, for transportation, for jobs. I would love to see this as just, you know, one piece of a vision that really can articulate what a resilient future looks like for all of us in every sector. And I think this is a really critical way for folks to get involved with our chapter, if you're here in Vermont, and with all of your chapters in just planning for the future. And really, I think in terms of policy, it's really critical because we are so often in a position of just responding to everything that comes at us and reacting. And the more that we can articulate this clear vision of where we're going and what we're doing, that can help guide our work and keep us focused on what we're trying to accomplish. So I really encourage you to get involved with your chapter in thinking about these big picture things. It's, you know, it's intimidating, but I think it's so exciting when we can actually start to lay out some vision of where we're going and what we're trying to accomplish together. So thank you so much. And I'm excited to hear from everybody else.
Great. Thank you, Maddie. Let's go on to Marty in Massachusetts.
Awesome. Hey, what's up, everyone? Marty Dagoberto here, Policy Director for the Northeast Organic Farming Association of Massachusetts, calling in from occupied Pecumtuck territories in Franklin County, present day, Western Massachusetts. Yeah, it's you know, interesting times, but nonetheless, it's good to see many of you here and to connect and to hear familiar voices and to hear about great progress going on in other states and look into the future. I wanted to share a brief outline of what our existing, you know, and ongoing policy goals have been at the state level here in Massachusetts, but really hone in on 2 intermittent victories that may have some, you know, lessons that can be shared and perhaps inspiration for similar action in other areas. You know, so in the before times, as we call them, before the pandemic, you know, we had a robust slate of policy priorities that we had been working on that have been, you know, building over several sessions. Massachusetts has a 2-year legislative session. And, you know, we have the Healthy Soils Bill that has very strong support in both chambers with no one opposed, that would set up a healthy soils program for the state. I'll be with right now we're in the final stage of this session, and that might be one bill we can get through the process with the few days that we have left. We have the Pollinator Protection Act, which would restrict the use of neonicotinoids, a class of bee-killing pesticides, and restrict that to licensed applicators. I'll touch on that in a second. We've had 3 different glyphosate-related bills that have attracted a lot of attention and obviously a big rallying point for many of our base. Of note, we had a bill that had started out as a statewide ban, all-out ban on glyphosate, and was actually updated and redrafted and passed by the Agriculture Committee as a consumer ban on glyphosate. Now it's pretty much you know, stuck in session, and I just got a message from Caro. Can you ask Al to turn off the waiting room? Al, can you turn off the waiting room? We had a glyphosate bill move out of committee, which is a good sign that would end consumer use of glyphosate. Raw milk delivery has been a perennial issue that we've been trying to work on, but the current administration is against raw milk delivery. We've endorsed campaigns for immigrant rights, for Safe Communities Act, and a driver's license bill. Sorry, another message from Caro here, or get him to make me a co-host so that I can do it for him. Yeah, Al, I don't know if you need help figuring out how to shut off the waiting room, but I'm happy to help with that after my talk here. Sorry about that, folks. We had a couple cannabis and hemp-related bills that are increasingly important here in Massachusetts. But, you know, then COVID hit, and we've pretty much been in a holding pattern until earlier this month on most of our priorities. Now, our legislators are actually still in session, and we have 1 week left. So it's actually too soon to give much of a post-mortem on most of our bills, and too late to rally much last-minute support. But I did want to, like I said, share a couple highlights, intermittent victories that we've had that we're continuing to build upon. You know, when COVID did hit and we realized we needed to circle up with other groups and address the situation, a lot of our early advocacy was related to farmers markets, keeping them open and safe, helping to provide for guidelines for that, and then working with other groups, calling for PPE for farm workers and other protections. And then really we've been holding up the leadership of, or at least trying to hold up the leadership of POC-led organizations and the Black and Latinx caucus, you know, since the murder of George Floyd, and really holding up solutions for racial justice in the legislature, and still hoping to see a few things move there. But I did want to share briefly how we were able to get the state to perform an independent review of neonicotinoids. You know, like I said, we've been working on this bill to restrict consumer use of neonics for several sessions now. And one of the, you know, one of the common refrains from, let's say, the chemical lobby and their cutouts, I won't name names here, but one of their common refrains is that we need more research, that the science is still out on whether or not neonicotinoids, or whatever insert the pesticide or chemical concern, they'll say there's need for more review on that. So they had actually filed a budget appropriation request for, I believe, $25,000 for the state to review neonics. And rather than fight it as a red herring, our pollinator champion doubled down and pushed to have that increase to 100,000. And we advocated for transparency measures on that, and we're able to get an appropriation for 100,000 that includes public oversight of the state's review of neonics. Long story short, the Secretary of Energy and Environmental Affairs, knowing the power of the grassroots, knowing that we would have our eyes on this, was very much in support of a process with some integrity. And at the end of the day, we ended up with a report that clearly upholds the need to restrict the use of neonics. So now we're actually pushing the administration to enact the consumer ban independent of the legislature. And so there's an opportunity there. Sorry, I have my own timer here. There's an opportunity there to increase pressure to review other compounds. So, you know, looking at glyphosate, looking at other pesticides, that we can push the state to, you know, perform its own independent review, really just a literature review, so that they can have their own say that, yeah, actually we should do something about this. The other major campaign that we've had an intermittent victory on is regarding spray for arbovirus, mosquito disease. The governor filed really what was a disastrous bill in April that would have granted authoritarian control over the spray for mosquitoes. And so we, NOFA, we quickly helped corral a wide coalition of advocates, including water protector groups, you know, some allies that we've been working with on healthy soils, groups that we've been wanting to work more with, other environmental groups we've worked with in several campaigns, our national partners at Beyond Pesticides, and we've been facilitating weekly virtual meetings since mid-April. Which, you know, a couple just quick pointers on that, having everything be opt-in with the coalition, so that public statements and letters, there's no need to achieve consensus at every juncture. We have our partners opt into things, and we were able to provide a unified voice for the most part to legislators, which they really appreciate, resulting in, you know, working with our legislative allies that we've been building relationships with over the years. It resulted in a redraft of the bill that, you know, while the overall bill still increases, you know, pesticide spraying, which we can't support, it does establish a task force they call the Mosquito Control for the 21st Century Task Force to look at a complete overhaul of the state's mosquito disease management program, and has organic agriculture represented with its own seat on the task force. So there's an opportunity there for those in the NOFA-verse to provide input on this process, which begins next month. And I'd love to connect with anyone, you know, working in other states who is addressing the issue of mosquito-borne diseases, because it's likely something that's only going to increase as the climate further destabilizes. So I will leave it there for questions later. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Marty. Let's move on to Connecticut. Dina Brewster.
Thank you, Bert. Al, you're going to make me a co-host so I can do this? Yep. Thanks. Connecticut is an interesting state in that we used to have a policy advocate, Bill Dusing, many of you guys know as our founder, and he was a champion of so much of our work. Now, without anyone on staff to really focus on policy, we find ourselves integrating our policy work into a lot of our projects and education work as well. It was my hope on this call that the chapter updates would start to sound a little repetitive because all of us are really, I think, sharing a common mission and a common vision for what we can do on our state and federal level. So some of what I say, I think will, you will have heard, and so I will try to go quickly through it. Let's see if I can share this screen and hopefully, let's see, that didn't work very well. Hold on. There we go. So I'll give you a second just to kind of look this over, because this summarizes how we think about our different policy initiatives. But essentially, our policy work falls into the same set of bottom lines that the rest of our projects, our green projects and our education work is milled through. We are thinking about, on our policy front, that same triple bottom line for our organization. What is our ecological work around the policy initiatives we have taken on? Some of our policy initiatives have to do with the economic durability of our farms. And then lastly, issues of equity and what we would consider sort of a social bottom line for many of our, for this movement. So on the ecological front, the policy work you can see is very similar to the other NOFA chapters. We're doing work on developing a soil health bill. Bill championed the pollinator bill, which remains, I think, a real flagship in our state, and has currently morphed into some work on chlorpyrifos and ultimately other neonics as well. So that is the sort of ecological footprint that we work on. We build policy, as I said, education, and then programs, kind of boots on the ground work for each of those. Next are the sort of economic policy initiatives, and those folks have talked about in other chapters as a COVID response bill. The only thing that we can add in Connecticut is that I think it's important for our state to focus on holding the market share, or the importance of the market share for organic agriculture. And so early on in the pandemic, we were able to produce a map and a guide to what farms were open, not only working on food access, but just simply on market awareness for what farms are still sort of rising in this, in response to this current situation. And then lastly, the social bottom line, or the social policy work. You've heard a certain amount of, from other chapters as well, of farmland access, support for beginning farmers. And the only thing we can really add to that is work here that is listed on the slide around equity and education. So we have focused in our policy priorities and in our projects on Spanish translation of many of our programs, as well as also what we see as a policy priority around farmer mental health support in our state. So that is another sort of unique take, I think, in Connecticut. And so with that, I think I can save anything else, any other discussion for questions. But at least it is heartening to hear, and this call has been so inspiring for us to hear how much our work and our values really begins to tie into something that is a regional identity around how we can shape the country. So thank you guys again.
Great. Thanks, Dina. Let's go on to New Hampshire. Sarah. You have to unmute yourself, Sarah.
Hello, everybody. It's so great to see you all and to have this annual overview of the work we're all doing, and to see these overlaps and so forth that Dina mentioned. So I think I'm going to go back in time to what feels like much more than a year ago, but was last fall, when in New Hampshire, NOFA New Hampshire joined with 15 other organizations to put on a food solutions forum, to which we invited all of the presidential candidates to answer questions about how they would address agriculture in their platforms. And it was somewhat of a fishing expedition. We didn't know how many would come. We got two people, Tulsi Gabbard and Howie Hawkins, came and answered our questions. And we also had a couple of wonderful panels, one of local providers and then one on New Hampshire advocates for our food system and a community-based food system. And we also hired Ken Meter, who's a national leader on economic analyses of community-based food systems. He did a study of New Hampshire's food system. And all of the resources from that event are on our website, foodsolutionsforum.com. And there are videos from the event, resources from all of our partners. It was really exciting to have such a broad coalition. So you can go there for also the study by Ken Meter. And he really shows the opportunities to strengthen our local economy by buying more locally. So he showed that in New Hampshire, farmers lose $8 million each year, raising $234 million of crops and livestock. At the same time, New Hampshire residents spend $4 billion each year purchasing food sourced outside the state. And so there we have a tremendous opportunity, so that if each New Hampshire resident purchased just $5 of food each week from a New Hampshire farm, our farms would earn $349 million of income. That's 1.5 times what they're currently earning. So really, agriculture represents this tremendous economic opportunity that could ripple through our communities. So you can look on our website if you want to learn more about that. And we also made a toolkit for how other states can, or other groups can really do more policy work around elections and adhere to the compliance rules for nonprofits, but still be very bold in advocating for really vibrant agricultural policy that will serve us over time and build our resilience going forward. Next, I want to talk about our work. We were asked, our COVID-related work, we have in New Hampshire what's called GOFER, the Governor's Office for Emergency Relief and Recovery. And there's a stakeholder advisory board that invited NOFA New Hampshire to submit testimony. And we really made the argument that through strengthening our locally based, community-based providers, that at the same time not only would build food security and resilience over time, but it also would help to reboot the economy in a way that we believe no other sector has the potential. Since everybody needs to eat 3 times a day, it's a basic need. And when people buy from local providers, that money circulates through the local economy many more times than if we buy from out of the state. And so it's a really powerful and efficient and effective way to address well-being and health, farmer viability, and also economic vibrancy. So unfortunately, the Farm Bureau was selected as the person people to give the testimony to the advisory board, and we did a survey of many of our local farmers and consumers, and none of it was mentioned during the testimony. And the decision was made to only make COVID relief monies available to farmers who grossed $50,000 annually or more. So that leaves out 90% of the state's farmers. So we wrote a sign-on letter and got other organizations to say that we thought that that was not a well-considered decision, and we got it in a couple local newspapers as well. So it's not completely without hope, as there was $4 million had been reserved for emergency grants to ensure stability in the food supply. So we're hoping that local, smaller farmers can apply for that money. Like the other chapters, we've been working on soil health and have had a listening session and worked with a couple of local businesses as well as the nonprofit sector and farmers, of course, to promote quite a limited bill to start that would have included soil health in the mandate for the conservation districts. Unfortunately, it passed the House Ag and Environment Committee unanimously with an amendment, but nevertheless passed, but it's been put on the table in the Senate. So we hope to continue this work and actually have a much broader bill that would include a soil health action plan and possibly a task force and incentives for farmers. And then we've supported other bills this past year before COVID hit, and they include, I'm sorry, I have to pull this up.
Sarah, we have to wrap this up.
Okay. Well, okay, some pesticide bills and several that other chapters have spoken about. And we also do work with organic land care in the spring of 2021. Look forward to a multi-day workshop on organic land care for municipal and other institutional land managers and groundkeepers in conjunction with NOFA Connecticut. So thank you all.
Thanks.
Thank you. I'm at a disadvantage on this because I can't see anybody. I have to join in on by phone because of my lack of rural bandwidth. And this actually is an issue that farmers particularly are trying to sponsor all across the country to kind of get ourselves on equal footing with the rest of the country. So we're now in our question period, and I'm not sure the best way to handle this since I can't see it. So maybe Elizabeth, if you can flag questions, then we can open it up to any one of us to answer.
Yeah, anybody can put your hand up and ask a question. Put your hand up, I'll call on you.
And if people want, you can use I think everybody should have the reactions option, and you can add a thumbs up if that's a helpful way for folks to let us know if you have a question or a comment.
I don't see any hands up. Sarah Stranahan, you have a question?
Yes, how did you see me?
You're like,
oh, because I unmuted. My question is there a shared set of priorities where there could be a common agenda, and would it be around, you know, soil, climate change and soil carbon, or pesticides, or food security, or justice for farm workers? Like, what if there were, and I think this was mentioned by you in the very beginning, Elizabeth, that there could be something maybe based on Vermont, where there were 4 or 5 shared issues in addition to all of the unique issues for each state that were kind of a unified policy platform for NOFA Northeast. Is that a possibility?
Sarah, we already do have a unified platform, which is based on the 4 principles of organic agriculture from the International Federation of Organic Agriculture Movements. And that's why when you hear what all the different chapters are doing, it's really pretty similar in every state. So we do share that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just add also that we are a member of alliances, and these are national and international, and so to some extent we're involved in a broader agenda that includes much of the country. For instance, the appropriations process in Congress for funding agricultural programs. One of our affiliates is NSAC, the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition, that really concentrates on the farm bills, which are every 5 years. So as Liz has explained, we're really now trying to focus on a regional way forward to celebrate our 50th anniversary, and I think this will strengthen our presence in our national coalitions as well.
Hey,
anybody else want to chime in on that?
Other questions or statements people would like to make?
I was just going to add in response to Sarah's thought that though we meet together publicly as a policy committee during the summer conference, this group of policy representatives from the different NOFA states meets throughout the year. And as someone who is new to the NOFA staff position, I can assure all of our members that the policy team that the Interstate Council puts together, we are constantly taking ideas from each other, though. So Connecticut doesn't have a policy staff person. Throughout the year, I am simply cutting and pasting from what New York and Massachusetts and Vermont and other states in the NOFA universe are doing. So I do think we work together very well, even despite the different positions that each state may find itself in.
Clint, go ahead.
Hi, this is Clint Richmond from NOFA Mass Policy Committee. I was just wondering to what extent we have model bills that are common to the states or regions, or because a lot of people like the Farm Bureau or ALEC or some of these other awful organizations, they pump out model bills all the time. I was wondering if we have some good guy bills, and did we get any update? My second question is, did we get any update on anything that's happening at the federal level? Although I know that's always a minefield, but. Anybody care to comment on that? Any victories there?
Well, as to model bills, we always share bill language with one another, and several chapters are also involved with the multi-state soil health policy network, and we get materials there which we then share with one another. And that network is involved with yet another network that does just what you said. It writes bills and will support the writing of a bill for a group like NOFA. So if there were something that we wanted to write a particular, like payment for ecosystem services, they would help us write a bill like that then we could share around among the chapters.
Because I know from working at the state level, it's always easier to say, oh, and this is the same bill that's being proposed in Vermont and it's been passed out of their agriculture committee or whatever.
Right.
So that sounds good.
So the group that Liz mentioned is called SIX, State Innovation Exchange.
Thank you.
The other thing is also, again, through our alliances, we're involved in much broader legislation at the national level. And I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, this is Steve, that there's a number of initiatives being put forth. Shelley Pingree, a Democrat from Maine, is one of our biggest champions in the House. and her Organic Resilience Act is basically a climate change vehicle serving as a marker bill that then states can also pick and choose pieces of to move in their own state legislatures.
That's
So,
the Agricultural Resilience Act.
yes, thank you.
Yeah.
You know, we're working on a number of levels all at the same time. I think the states have different outlooks, for sure, politically, and our state chapters have different capacities. And so within those confines, what's emerged from the Interstate Council is this policy committee where we can kind of move each other along through through all these initiatives, both national, regional, and international.
Yeah, internationally, through our membership in IFOAM, we don't have the capacity to do very much, but IFOAM is represented very regularly at the United Nations and the Food and Agriculture Organization, and as an active member of the civil society mechanism, which represents NGOs and non-governmental people at the United Nations and actually has a say in some of the deliberations that take place. Although I have to say that right now within the Food and Agriculture Organization, after having swung very much towards agroecology, there is a counter pressure being exerted by the agribusiness people and the Gates Foundation thinking about, you know, the green revolution and GMOs and how wonderful that would be for Africa to push back on the work of FAO. So we do have at least a finger involved on that level as well. Are there other questions or statements? This is your big opportunity.
If nobody else has anything at the moment, I definitely want to give space first and foremost for folks participating to weigh in. But one thing that I've just been noticing, I think I want to throw out there in relation to this conversation around our national and international partners is just this idea that I think is becoming so clear as a result of the pandemic that that we're really all dependent on one another, and that all of the issues that we are working on and that, you know, folks in other sectors are working on are just so interrelated. And I think we, because of capacity challenges, so often limit ourselves to working kind of within our really narrow silos. But I think that what I'm seeing in Vermont is just this huge opportunity through some of the new coalitions that we formed with, you know, food security folks and farm worker and other migrant Vermonter advocates, that the more we can dedicate even small amounts of time to really learning about and lifting up each other's issues, the better off we'll all be. I mean, for example, we started working with a couple of groups here in Vermont. One is Vermont Legal Aid and the other is the Vermont Workers Center, who work a lot on healthcare issues and working on kind of universal and single payer healthcare here in Vermont. And that issue has always frankly felt like one of those to me where I felt like I know this is impacting the farming community, but I don't really know how we get involved. And just last week, the Green Mountain Care Board, which is a state board that has to approve health insurance rate increases, was meeting to decide whether or not to approve some proposed rate increases through our two healthcare providers here in Vermont, or health insurance companies, I should say. And we put out an action alert to our, you know, list of 10,000 or so folks. And it was really the first time we had done a large scale action alert like that on healthcare. And I was very curious to see what kind of response we would get. A lot of the time when we do things like that, people will write to us and say, you should stick to organic farming. This isn't really your area. We got none of those responses. We had about 50 people respond to our survey that that really put them through to submitting a comment directly to the Green Mountain Care Board. And that was just so exciting to me to see that, like, that small amount of effort that we put in to raise up that issue within the farming community and helping them to connect it to the direct impact it would have on them, which frankly, we didn't have to do anything. Farmers and folks in the ag community understand the impacts of the lack of access to healthcare on themselves. And so it was just really exciting. And I think there's so much more of that work that we could be doing. And I just think, when we do that, we lift all boats. So I would encourage you all to start to be more mindful of those interconnections.
Yeah, I'd like to, that's a perfect sentiment for where we're finding ourselves at NOFA New York. The more that we look broader, the more collaborations we're having in a bigger sense. And certainly food access and access to good food is, at the heart of what organic is. But in these days, it's really ramped up. We as farmers can have a role in feeding our neighbors and our region, and it's vital now. People understand that vitality that we have been fighting for so many decades, that the food system is what we have, what we're providing now. So I think it is really important for all of the NOFAs to take a step back and say, yes, we're all resource limited, but we can do just a bit more to broaden what we're about and the results of what we can do for food.
This next decade is really going to be critical for the whole world in relation to climate change. And this moment is critical for this country in relation to racism and white supremacy. There's so much that's coming together right now that thinking in these terms of how we can build the biggest coalition that we possibly can. And internationally, IFOAM is saying the same thing. A couple of years ago, IFOAM declared that it's time for Organic 3.0. Organic 1.0 was the kind of the founding, thinkers of organic and the farmers who discovered it. Organic 2.0 was categorizing it and writing standards, harmonizing the standards, and arguing with one another over, narrow points of, exactly what the standards should be everywhere and who could trade with who. And IFOAM 2 years ago declared, now it's time for 3.0, which means we look around to see who is going in the same direction that we are going in and stop arguing over these little minor differences and work together, because that's how we're going to transform the food system and transform the world and survive climate change.
I'd like to throw one more thing in there, and that has to do with organic integrity. And so we are a member of very many different groups and coalitions, and that's definitely the way to go. But we have our own work always cut out for ourselves in terms of keeping an eye on what's going on with organic through the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which has never been a friendly place for organic. Back in the old days, they tried
Isn't it really called the Department of Agribusiness, Steve?
Well, that's a good way to do it. Initially, they tried to keep us out, and now that it's so lucrative, everybody wants in. And so there are so many fronts that we're working on, trying to preserve and advance what we all hold near and dear as organic. So this is something that's been on the NOFA agenda ever since I've been around, and it's something we all have to be very diligent about. So I would, we're working with others, and that's critical, but we also have our own work.
Great, thank you. Would any of the people who are not members of our committee, Couchman, I don't know your first name. Please.
Hi, Edith. is my name. I just want to give an example. I'm from New Hampshire, and an example of working across sectors and also being inspired by the other NOFAs. Here in New Hampshire, we look to the Maine feeding, the Vermont feeding Vermonters and Maine feeding Mainers model for getting some funding during the COVID crisis for our farmers to grow for our New Hampshire food bank, and that was really successful. We got a lot of CARES money for that particular initiative. And it looks like there might even, we want to go forward with that with the New Hampshire Food Alliance. That has been a really good organization for us to work with. I think that the food access idea of making sure that our kids have access to the best quality local food is a really important thing going forward. And if we can talk about the organic the benefits of organic agriculture, the nutritional density, the quality of the local food for our kids in terms of a public health perspective, that's going to be one of those areas that we should work towards in the next year, because we are going to have more food access issues for our kids. And instead of giving them government commodities, we should be giving them food from our local farmers. And so I think that's one area our NOFAs can work towards in the coming years. But I just want to say how much I was impressed by the NOFA New York's handout about goals for the coming years. I think it was a major effort to develop that two-page infographic. And would it be possible to turn that into a more generic sort of, these are our goals as NOFA at Northeast? Could we do that for our 50th anniversary?
Did you come in late?
Oh, did I? Yeah, I didn't realize.
Because, yeah, that's exactly what I said at the beginning, that I hoped we could do a process like that.
Well,
for all of the NOFAs together.
Yes, and feeding onto that. And feeding onto that idea, I just wondered if we could use that infographic as.
Absolutely.
Oh, good. That would be so wonderful.
And NOFA Vermont, in their stimulus plan, really has an outline of the kind of thinking we need to go through.
Yes.
To look at all the different kinds of programs in each state that we can muster to work together. So I think we have really the beginnings of something that could be exciting work over the next year. Maybe every winter conference next winter could have a session for the NOFA Organic Action Plan, so that by the summer conference next summer, when we have the big 50th anniversary celebration, we can have our illustration, filled in and
that'd be great.
Signed.
I think, Liz, too, what I love about that infographic is that it has ways to get involved at all different scales, and that's not really something that we have fleshed out in our plan. And something I really appreciate is, these are opportunities to get involved locally, at the state level, at the national level, and I think that's really powerful because different people have different capacities to get engaged. And I think we have to really, be mindful of that and help people plug in where it's meaningful and easy for them. So I love that suggestion. Thank you.
I wanted to, there we go. We can end with that. Well, we just have a few more minutes, so. Edie, did you want to say something?
Well, I would just like to see that, so it says Organic New England or Northeast Organic, just so it's just changed the wording a little bit, and it would be so useful for us all.
Great, we can do it.
Wonderful, thank you.
And each thing links to, a whole series of things that people can do on any level. So it allows us to have, if you click on the Know Your Issues, you can see what the NOFA New York legislation is, and the national, you can see what the national issues are, what's in the Farm Bill. So it's a nice opportunity to put together a package that anybody can access really on any level. And the beginning thing of what you can do yourself locally is a one-pager that I've distributed all over the place in New York events. What you can do starting today.
think this is also a great way, just to tie it really quickly back to, you know, this moment of the pandemic that we're experiencing. You know, here in Vermont, we've seen people turning to their local farmers really in this new way, and accessing local food. And I think that there's been a lot of conversation here in Vermont, at least, and I'm sure elsewhere, about how do we keep that momentum going. And I think something like this is a really great way, because it sort of gives people, you know, easy actions they can do at home as sort of a, you know, maybe an entry-level step, right, that builds on that momentum that people have started to understand more about their food, and then they can sort of level up as they become more engaged as part of this movement. And I really see the 50th anniversary as a huge opportunity, you know, to both celebrate our past and bring people in to say, this isn't just about NOFAs, the organizations, this is about you, and it's your movement, and we need everybody to get involved in, you know, making the next 50 even better and accomplishing even more. So I think this is a really, it's a really great, just like illustrative way to start to have that conversation.
Thanks, Maddie. I just want to add one more thing, and that is, we've heard chapter presentations today, and that's really your primary access point for NOFA, is to become more active with your chapter's policy committees, structures. There's always a lot of work to be done at conferences, and so this whole organic action plan going forward for the Northeast is going to be done chapter by chapter and then combined all together. So we're really encouraging folks to get involved in their chapters, to reach out to neighbors and other people who are concerned with the same things we are, and it's a broad agenda. And so this is a real opportunity, and we're coming right now to the end of our session, and I just want to thank everybody for joining us, and I want to thank the chapters in the middle of their busy time this summer with everything else going around for joining in tonight and putting together some things to demonstrate where there's state chapters are and where we're going. And then I really want to thank Liz for articulating where we can go next with an organic action plan. So if anybody else would like to chime in before we say good evening, please do so. Okay. Well, thank you very much, folks. And please keep in touch.
Okay, thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for coming.
Good health, everyone.